Today, we're diving into a massive, frankly mind-blowing historical mystery. How exactly did a fragmented, local pastime turn into, literally, the largest geopolitical and cultural unifier on the planet? We're going to unpack the astonishing scale of the modern FIFA World Cup by tracing its roots back to some incredibly humble and honestly highly improbable beginnings.
Right, let's dive into this. Think about today. Billions of us tuning in simultaneously on our smartphones, watching superstar athletes in these absolute megastadiums. But back in the late 1800s, football was hyperlocal. International travel was a huge luxury, and communication was painstakingly slow. Yet, out of those isolated origins, a single visionary dream transformed the game into the most spectacular sporting event on Earth.
Section 1. The Birth of FIFA and the Impossible Dream.
Okay, so in the late 1800s, football was just booming across Europe, but there wasn't any global governing body to organize it. That all changed on May 21st, 1904. Representatives from just 7 countries gathered in the streets of Paris to form FIFA. It definitely wasn't a straight path, but that one single meeting set a century of history into motion.
Now, the absolutely crucial piece of the puzzle is the vision of one man, FIFA President Jules Rimet. See, for years, if you wanted to catch an international tournament, you had to watch the amateur-focused Olympic Games. Well, Rimet wanted to pull football entirely out from under the Olympic shadow. He had this dream of a standalone tournament where the absolute best nations could compete strictly for global supremacy.
At the time, this idea bordered on madness. Seriously, nations were still reeling, financially and physically, from the utter devastation of World War I. International travel was completely exhausting, and global communication was almost non-existent. But Rimet pushed forward anyway, even when literally everyone else told him it couldn't be done.
Section 2. The Ultimate Test in 1930.
So think about it for a second. The sport's power base was in Europe, right? And transatlantic travel took weeks. So why on earth did FIFA choose Uruguay, a relatively small South American nation, to host the inaugural tournament?
Well, Uruguay had the ultimate leverage. Yes, they were the reigning Olympic gold medalists with a phenomenal squad, but more importantly, in a stroke of absolute brilliance, Uruguay offered to foot the bill. They promised to pay the travel and lodging expenses for every single participating team. They essentially bankrolled the birth of the World Cup.
But even with free tickets, we're not talking about a modern luxury flight here. European teams spent weeks crossing the Atlantic Ocean on steamships. Imagine trying to maintain peak athletic conditioning, doing calisthenics on the deck of a rocking boat for 3 weeks just to reach the pitch. It's crazy. Because of that staggering logistical nightmare, only 13 nations made the trip. Just 13. It is a massive far cry from the 32 or 48-team megastructures we're used to seeing today.
Those 13 trailblazers included the host, Uruguay, South American powerhouses like Argentina and Brazil, and a handful of European nations, France, Belgium, Romania, Yugoslavia, who braved the ocean. Surprisingly enough, the United States also stepped up to make international football history.
And you know what? The massive gamble actually paid off. On July 30th, 1930, the Stadio Centenario in Montevideo was absolutely packed with a staggering 68,000 fans for the final match. For a single, standalone sporting event back in 1930, an audience that size was completely monumental.
That final match featured a brutal, neighboring rivalry, Uruguay versus Argentina. Argentina actually struck first, taking a lead that completely silenced the massive home crowd. But Uruguay fought back ferociously, turning the tide to win 4-2, and crowning themselves the undisputed first champions of the world.
Section 3. The Abyss and the Resurrection. So just as the tournament was really finding its footing in the 1930s, global conflict brought it all to a devastating halt. With the outbreak of World War II, FIFA had no choice but to cancel the 1942 and 1946 tournaments. Stadiums sat totally empty, and a lot of people feared this nascent international experiment was simply going to fade into history.
But the sport survived. When the dust of the war finally settled, the global appetite for football hadn't diminished at all. If anything, it had multiplied. The World Cup returned entirely unrecognizable from its pre-war days.
This post-war explosion was fueled by a whole new wave of nations joining the fold. But the true gasoline on the fire? Television. For the first time ever, you didn't need a ticket to the stadium to witness the magic. TV brought the pitch right into people's living rooms, single-handedly creating the era of global football legends.
Because of these global broadcasts,
Players like Pelé, Diego Maradona, Zinedine Zidane, Lionel Messi, and Cristiano Ronaldo, they weren't just local heroes anymore. They became international icons, turning the World Cup into the ultimate stage for sporting immortality.
Section 4. The Modern Phenomenon.
From an impossible dream and a scrappy 13-team experiment, the World Cup is now unequivocally the most watched sporting event on Earth. Billions tune in, entire countries literally shut down. It dictates the collective emotions of nations who unite in the streets to celebrate glorious victories and mourn heartbreaking defeats. Every 4 years, the entire world just agrees to pause and watch.
Now, I want to turn it over to you. We've traced this incredible history, but what's your absolute favorite piece of it? Is it a classic moment from Pelé, a recent triumph from Messi, or maybe an unforgettable underdog story? Let me know your favorite chapter of World Cup history in the comments below. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I'll